Have you ever wondered how we got here? Not just you and me, but all of it. Every tree, every animal, every tiny microbe. Our story begins an unimaginable time ago, about 4.5 billion years in the past, when our planet was nothing but a chaotic, fiery ball of molten rock, born from the swirling dust and gas of a young solar system. It was a violent, hostile world, constantly bombarded by asteroids and comets. So how did this inferno transform into the lush, vibrant, living world we know today? That is one of the greatest mysteries, a cosmic detective story, billions of years in the making, and today we're going to travel back in time to uncover the clues and piece together the incredible origin of life on Earth. Let's rewind the clock to about 3.8 billion years ago. Imagine a young Earth, its surface still hot, with vast warm oceans under a hazy reddish sky. The atmosphere was a toxic mix of methane, ammonia, and water vapor, completely devoid of the oxygen we breathe. This primordial soup was constantly zapped by fierce lightning storms and bombarded by intense ultraviolet radiation from a young, energetic sun. It sounds like the last place you'd expect to find life, right? But it was in this very crucible that the first spark of life was ignited. In the 1950s, two scientists, Stanley Miller and Miller-Urey, conducted a groundbreaking experiment. They tried to recreate the conditions of early Earth in a lab. They filled a flask with water, methane, ammonia, and hydrogen, then sent electrical sparks through it to simulate lightning. What they found was astonishing. After just 1 week, the water turned a murky brown, and when they analyzed it, they discovered it was teeming with amino acids, the fundamental building blocks of proteins. They had spontaneously created the raw materials of life from simple, non-living molecules. This showed that the jump from non-life to life might not have been such a huge leap after all. The ingredients were all there, just waiting for the right recipe. But having the ingredients is one thing. You still need a chef, a set of instructions. This is where a remarkable molecule called RNA comes into the picture. Today, DNA is the master blueprint of life, storing all our genetic information, and proteins are the workhorses that carry out all the cellular tasks. But back then, RNA was the star of the show. Scientists believe in something called the RNA world hypothesis. You see, RNA is a jack of all trades. Like DNA, it can store genetic information. And like proteins, it can fold into complex shapes and catalyze chemical reactions. This dual ability is key. Imagine an RNA molecule that could not only carry a simple instruction, but could also help make copies of itself. This was the birth of replication, the very essence of life. The first self-replicating code had emerged from the chemical chaos, starting a chain reaction that would eventually lead to the incredible diversity of life we see today. It was the dawn of evolution. For millions of years, these self-copying molecules floated in the ancient oceans, competing, evolving, and growing more complex. But they were fragile, exposed to the harsh environment. The next great leap was to build a house, a protective barrier. About 3.5 billion years ago, life invented its greatest innovation, the cell. The first cells, known as prokaryotes, were incredibly simple. They were essentially little bubbles of fatty molecules called lipids, enclosing a bit of the primordial soup, along with those precious RNA molecules and other organic bits. This membrane was a game changer. It separated the inside from the outside, creating a stable, controlled internal environment where the chemistry of life could proceed much more efficiently. It was a private little world, a sanctuary where life could truly begin to organize itself. And we have direct evidence of these ancient pioneers. If you travel to Shark Bay in Western Australia, you can see living fossils called stromatolites. These are layered, mound-like structures built by colonies of microbes. And when we look at the geological record, we find fossilized stromatolites that are 3.5 billion years old. Peering into these ancient rocks is like looking through a window into life's infancy, witnessing the first communities on our planet. These simple prokaryotic cells were the undisputed rulers of Earth for over 1 billion years, slowly and steadily colonizing every available niche in the oceans. For a long, long time, the world was an anaerobic one, meaning life thrived in the absence of oxygen. In fact, oxygen was a deadly poison to these early organisms. But then a new type of bacteria evolved that would change the world forever. Enter the cyanobacteria. These were the true revolutionaries. They developed an incredible new trick, photosynthesis. Using just sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, they could produce their own food. But this process had a side effect, a waste product that they released into the atmosphere. That waste product was oxygen. Slowly at first, then with increasing momentum, these tiny cyanobacteria began pumping massive amounts of oxygen into the oceans and the air. For the existing anaerobic life, this was a catastrophe of epic proportions. The Great Oxidation Event, as it's called, was likely Earth's first and perhaps greatest mass extinction. The very air became toxic to the dominant life forms. But from this crisis came an incredible opportunity. The rise of oxygen completely reshaped the planet's chemistry and paved the way for a new, more powerful way to live. Life that could not only tolerate oxygen but harness its potent energy-releasing power would have a massive evolutionary advantage. The stage was set for the next big act in our story, the rise of complex life. Around 2 billion years ago, another revolutionary event took place, one born not of competition but of cooperation. This was the beginning of evolution's greatest partnership. Imagine a large, primitive host cell. At some point it engulfed a smaller bacterium, perhaps one that was very good at using oxygen to produce energy. But instead of digesting it, the host cell formed a symbiotic relationship with its new tenant. The smaller bacterium got a safe place to live, and the host cell got a super-efficient power plant living inside it. This internal power plant eventually evolved into what we now know as the mitochondrion, the energy factory present in almost all complex cells today, including our own. This process is called endosymbiosis, and it was a monumental step. A similar event happened with cyanobacteria. A host cell engulfed a photosynthesizing cyanobacterium, which then became the chloroplast, the part of a plant cell that converts sunlight into energy. This incredible teamwork led to the birth of eukaryotic cells, the complex compartmentalized cells that make up all fungi, plants, and animals, including us. With specialized internal organelles like mitochondria and chloroplasts, eukaryotes were far more complex and efficient than their prokaryotic ancestors. They had the power and the organizational structure to build bigger and more diverse forms. The foundation for all the spectacular life we see around us, from the smallest insect to the largest whale, was now in place. So from a fiery, sterile rock to a world teeming with cooperative, complex cells, the first half of Earth's history was a whirlwind of innovation and transformation. It's a story of chemistry turning into biology, of simplicity giving rise to complexity, and of crises leading to incredible new opportunities. The journey from the primordial soup to the first eukaryotic cell laid the groundwork for everything that was to follow. The explosion of multicellular life, the conquest of the land, the age of dinosaurs, and eventually the emergence of a certain curious species that would one day look back and try to piece it all together. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to the dawn of life. Travel back with me, way back, to a time when our planet looked completely different. We're going 540 million years into the past, to a period known as the Cambrian. Before this, life was pretty simple, mostly just single-celled organisms floating around. But then something incredible happened. It's called the Cambrian explosion, and it was like nature's biggest, most creative party ever. Over a relatively short span of geologic time, maybe just 20 million years, the oceans suddenly burst with new complex life. Imagine diving into these ancient seas. You wouldn't see any fish as we know them, but you'd be surrounded by some of the most bizarre and wonderful creatures imaginable. There were things like Anomalocaris, a giant shrimp-like predator with spiky arms and circular jaws. You'd see Hallucigenia, a worm-like creature walking on spiky stilts with tentacles on its back, and the famous trilobites, armored arthropods that scuttled across the seafloor, becoming one of the most successful early animal groups. It was during this incredible burst of evolution that the blueprints for almost every major animal group we see today From insects to snails to even our own distant relatives, the chordates, were first laid down. This was evolution's grand experiment, a time of unprecedented innovation that set the stage for everything that was to come. Now let's fast forward a few 100 million years. The land is covered in lush forests of ferns and strange trees, and a new group of animals has risen to become the undisputed rulers of the planet. We've arrived in the Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs. For an astonishing 165 million years, these magnificent creatures dominated every corner of the globe. This wasn't just a brief moment in time, it was an entire era defined by their presence. Think about the sheer scale and diversity. You had the giants, like the long-necked Argentinosaurus, so massive it would make a blue whale look small, peacefully munching on treetops. In the skies, pterosaurs with leathery wings, some as large as small airplanes, soared overhead. And then there were the predators, the celebrities of the dinosaur world. The one and only Tyrannosaurus rex with a bite force strong enough to crush bone wasn't just a movie monster. It was a real, living apex predator at the top of its food chain. But it wasn't all about size and ferocity. You had the majestic Triceratops with its 3 horns and bony frill, a powerful herbivore that likely traveled in herds. You had the fast, intelligent raptors, hunting in packs. From the frozen poles to the tropical equators, dinosaurs adapted and thrived. They were a true evolutionary success story, a dynasty that seemed like it would last forever. But even the greatest empires must fall, and their end would come not with a whimper, but with a cataclysmic bang. Picture this. 66 million years ago, life on Earth is business as usual for the dinosaurs. A T-Rex is hunting, a Triceratops is grazing. They have no idea that high above them, hurtling through the blackness of space, is their doom. A massive asteroid, estimated to be about 10 kilometers or 6 miles wide, is on a direct collision course with Earth. It strikes near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, with an impact so powerful it is almost impossible to comprehend. We're talking about the force of billions of atomic bombs going off at once. The immediate aftermath was apocalyptic. The impact vaporized rock, sending a superheated blast wave and colossal tsunamis racing across the globe. Trillions of tons of dust, soot, and debris were thrown high into the atmosphere, enveloping the entire planet in a thick, dark cloud. This triggered a nuclear winter. Sunlight was blocked for months, maybe even years. Photosynthesis stopped, plants died, and the entire food chain collapsed from the bottom up. Temperatures plummeted. Acid rain fell from the sky. It was a global catastrophe on a scale we've never witnessed. For the dinosaurs and about 75% of all species on Earth, it was game over. The long 165 million year reign of these incredible creatures was extinguished in a geologic instant. But from this utter devastation, from the ashes of a world destroyed, an incredible new chapter was about to begin. The slate had been wiped clean. With the great dinosaurs gone, the world was suddenly quiet. The thunderous footsteps were replaced by the rustling of small creatures in the undergrowth. This was the moment for a group of animals that had been living in the shadows for millions of years. The mammals. During the age of dinosaurs, our ancestors were mostly small, shrew-like, nocturnal animals. They had to be small and secretive to survive. But now, with the competition gone and countless ecological niches wide open, they seized their chance. This was the dawn of the age of mammals. What followed was another explosive radiation of life. Mammals began to diversify at an incredible rate, filling the roles left vacant by the dinosaurs. Some grew to enormous sizes like the Paraceratherium, a hornless rhino that was the largest land mammal ever. Some returned to the sea, evolving into the ancestors of whales and dolphins. Some took to the trees, their hands and feet adapting for a life of climbing. These were the primates. Among these tree dwellers was a lineage that would eventually lead to us. The asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs was a terrible tragedy, but without it, we simply wouldn't be here. It cleared the way for our mammalian ancestors to step out of the shadows and onto the world stage. Our own story, the human story, begins much more recently, in the savannas of Africa about 7 million years ago. The climate was changing and dense forests were giving way to open grasslands. This new environment presented a challenge for our primate ancestors. For one group, the pressure led to a revolutionary adaptation. They started walking on 2 feet, bipedalism. This freed up their hands to carry food, use tools, and protect their young. This is where we see early hominins like Australopithecus, famously represented by the fossil Lucy. From these upright walkers, our family tree began to branch out. We see the emergence of the genus Homo, our own genus. Homo habilis, the handyman, was one of the first to craft simple stone tools. Then came Homo erectus, who was taller, had a larger brain, and was the first of our ancestors to control fire and migrate out of Africa. They were pioneers, spreading across Asia and Europe. Evolution continued to shape us, favoring larger brains, greater intelligence, and complex social structures. Finally, we arrive at Homo sapiens, us. Around 300,000 years ago, our species emerged in Africa. What set us apart wasn't just our bigger brains, but our capacity for something truly unique. Complex language, symbolic thought, art, and culture. We could share knowledge across generations, cooperate in large groups, and imagine things that didn't exist. This cognitive revolution allowed us to outcompete other hominins like the Neanderthals and to spread to every continent on Earth. We became the first species in the 4.5 billion year history of our planet to be able to look back, study the fossils, analyze the DNA, and begin to understand this incredible, long, and winding story of our own origins. From the first spark of life to the Cambrian explosion, through the age of dinosaurs and their dramatic end, to the rise of mammals and our own journey out of Africa, it's the greatest story ever told, and the most amazing part, we're still writing it. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through deep time. If you found this as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. See you next time.